like a lot of progress happens when the younger generation get to rewrite the rules according to the changing times. And like what's interesting now is the new power that's rising is, the millennial generation, but the cream of the crop are making billions in crypto right now.
Yeah.
And they have very fine understanding of how monetary markets work. So I see a huge power change, right now. It's like, if you ever read the book, The Fourth Turning, it really describes every 4 generations. They go through archetypal kind of changes, and every fourth turning, last one was the Great Depression going into World War II, and we had a major shift of regime and infrastructure change. All the strong institutions we were built in present day was built then with high integrity, and now they've been dismantled. And we're actually in that fourth turning, in the fourth generation of that happening now. And it's the millennial generation that are now very capitalized with the ones that are capitalized, like SPF. They're very, it's new values. It's going to be a really interesting time in the next 10 years. I think it's ridiculous amounts of change we're going to have. And I think it's going to be positive. I'm not doom or gloom. Might be a bit of pain in the short term, but I think it's positive.
Is. So you talk about this thing going to 100 trillion, right? So what does that mean for Bitcoin price?
Yeah, per Bitcoin, right?
Right, yeah, $100 trillion per Bitcoin, obviously. If anybody's listening, Willy Woo has just predicted $100 trillion Bitcoin. Just so you guys hear.
It's possible if USD goes to zero.
But reasonably, cycle tops, is there a last cycle? Does it eventually just become a stable asset, because it's a standard? Where's this thing going in your mind?
I'm more and more siding on the last cycle. You can even see it on the chart. It's a drunken walk right now of demand and supply. We've had parabolic rises and a blow-off top in 4-year cycles for 3 times now. And this time we're doing these kind of weird drunken walks of demand and supply as different participants come in and different effects happen. And so I'm kind of like with Michael Saylor, which he said to Laura Shin, there is no top, Laura. I think we might just not have these 4-year cycles because they're predicated on a supply shock from the halvening. Every 4 years, the sell pressure from miners halves, and the sell pressure from miners is getting pretty small now. We're at 1.7% inflation rate per year from miners, and the next halvening goes from 1.7 to like 0.8% or something like that. That's infinitesimal in a supply shock when exchanges are already almost double that. Like the sell pressure from exchanges, if they were to sell all of their fees revenue into fiat, not saying they do, but they do sell some of it. The potential for their sell pressure is 2 times what miners do. The sell pressure from Grayscale's ETF, well, it's not an ETF, but their fee management fees of 2% is about 5% of all the miners combined right now. So as ETFs start to climb, their sell pressure comes in. So there's all these kind of mature market like demand supply impacts that are really starting to reduce what impacts miners have, which is what the 4-year cycles is predicated on. So I think we're now in the last cycle, and some people say, oh, we're getting lengthening cycles. No, it's just like we've just made a binary shift from 4-year cycles into correlations in demand and supply to macro markets.
But it's funny when you say the last cycle, I think your average person, the first thing is going to be like, oh my God, that's bearish. Like, this is it. It just went up and we're done. But I think the point is that it will just continue to rise, and even a 50% correction will be more temporary, and we don't have to wait 4 years to start going up again.
Yeah, thanks for the clarification. I mean, I like the last cycle. It's so dramatic, but you might use Dan Howard's super cycle. I mean, that sounds like we might skip a cycle, but I think it's like the cycles are ended, and now we're just, the only way is up through a drunken wander.